All right, welcome in to the MMA Hangout presented by Cuervo. We've got a massive one across the street at the Kaseya Center, UFC 314, and we had to bring in one of the GOATs, one of the legends, Luke Thomas. Luke, first and foremost, this is a card that we could be very happy about or very sad about very quickly when it comes to the legends of the sport. It can't happen to Volk again, Luke. We can't see this happen again to Volk, please.
It might.
Please.
It might. First of all, thank you for having me. But I mean, this is the sport. This is a sport that is deeply unforgiving. And you really have to think about something. One, how many times do you see a fighter lose a title and then get it back? It does happen. You've seen it. But even then, they typically don't hold on to it for any kind of second run for very long. A common example, I think today might even be the 2-year anniversary of Israel Adesanya beating Poatan to get the title back in that amazing win he had. But then he lost it in the fight right after that. So there are, of course, other examples, but just to be clear, Volkanovski, 36, I mean, he is an unbelievable talent, one of the best to ever do it, but he's also trying to fight against very, what I would call, uphill circumstances.
And that fight is the main event of the evening for UFC 314. That's Alexander Volkanovski versus Diego Lopez, who's been screaming up the featherweight charts. And I'm just looking at, I like to go back into the capsule of time and look back at like guys who have just been legends, and Volk just W's across the sheets until we get to Islam February 11th, 2023, which has been basically 2 years now and some change. That fight, which we thought there was a chance, like, wait a second, Volk like kind of stood on his business for a second, and at that last round, you see him on top of Islam, hitting him with elbows, hitting him with punches, and then since that moment, he's been 1-2, lost to Islam again, got flattened by Topuria, and we haven't seen him for basically a year. Right? Do we think that the Volkanovski that put together, looking here, 11 or 12 straight wins in the UFC, we can see that guy one more time? Or is it Diego Lopez, the rising star of the featherweight division, finally coming for what's his?
I mean, I will tell you that the ability to take punishment is a finite resource, and when you deplete it, there's really no getting it back. You can improve your defense to an extent, a very small one, but a helpful one. You can somewhat improve your ability to kind of roll with punches in a way, which is part of defensive skill. But in general, once that chin is cracked, you cannot put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And this is the way that I look at it. I mean, you're right. Diego Lopez is absolutely just barnstormed through the contendership queue. I mean, obviously he had the fight against Movsar, his UFC debut, which was on short notice, but since then it's been nothing but taking scalps. The reality is, as good as Lopez is, he's just not as good, technically speaking, as Volkanovski. Volkanovski has beaten better fighters. He's beaten better fighters multiple times. He's faced better fighters. He's faced better fighters across 2 different weight classes. He is simply much, much, much better and much more proven. But Diego Lopez, this is why this fight is actually kind of interesting. While he is, skilled himself, he's an interesting challenge in that he tends to find offense everywhere, right? A lot of guys have offense at certain ranges or in certain positions or certain contexts, and that's true to an extent for Diego Lopez, but you'll just notice whether he's in the clinch, whether he's at range, whether he's in mid-range, whether he's on top, whether he's on the bottom, whether he is in the clinch, whatever, he's constantly firing. He's constantly going for things. That's how he beat Sadiq Youssef. That's how he was able to land big shots on Brian Ortega. And so the point I'm trying to make here is, do I have any doubt that you will see, for as long as this fight lasts, a very, very skilled and ready to go Alexander Volkanovski? I have zero doubt. He is proven beyond proof. However, if he gets clipped, his durability to me is in question, and a guy like Diego Lopez excels in clipping opponents in all different kinds of scenarios.
Has this featherweight division been, I don't want to say cheapened, but has it been lessened by Ilya being like, you know what, I'm kind of good, I'm going up to 155 and I'm going to do my thing up there and try to fight Islam and try to fight the killers at 155. You look at what Volkanovski done, beat Max Holloway 3 times, beat T-City, has beaten Yair Rodriguez, who we'll talk about later on in this card. Like, he's already taken care of so many guys. Do you think Volkanovski was cheated out of that, all right, let me try to get this one back on Ilya?
I would say I'll split the difference.
Okay.
I would have loved to have seen that fight, but there was some questions like, well, Volkanovski went into that Topuria fight having just been head kicked by Islam, and he shouldn't have taken that fight on the relative, not short notice, but the minimal amount of time between them. And I do agree with that. But you saw what he did earlier, Topuria against Max. It really wouldn't have made a difference whether he got stopped in the second or the third or whatever. He was not going to make it out of the cage that day, in my opinion, getting against Ilia Topuria. And I think if they had a rematch, it wouldn't look necessarily all that different. However, what I will say is I am kind of annoyed that Topuria left the division. Now, to be clear, I don't speak for the fans necessarily. I think some people agree, some people don't. Some people are very excited at the prospect of an Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev super fight if that ends up materializing. But I will just say, to me, 145 is freaking red hot. You've got all the fights that you mentioned. Brian Ortega's still out there. Yair Rodriguez is on this card against Patricio Pitbull, the best fighter in Bellator history. And you could just go on down the list. If Ilia was still there, you just have this unbelievable contendership queue. So to me, losing Ilia is a loss for 45. At the same time, this division is so freaking stacked that there's still lots of good fights to be made there.
Speaking, so main event, Volkanovski Lopez. Who you got?
Again, Volkanovski is just so much better than him. I mean, I looked this up today. How many UFC champions have ever lost back-to-back fights being stopped and then reclaimed the title in their third fight? And to the best of my knowledge, the answer is only Randy Couture. But Randy Couture had to do it changing divisions, and it was only an interim title when he did it. In other words, what Volkanovski is attempting is literally without historical precedent. I think for that reason, I have to side uncomfortably with Diego Lopez.
It could be all over Saturday night, and all of us just looking at the TV screen, being like, I can't believe it. I can't believe
But
it.
I will say this. Listen, if Volkanovski goes in there and does what we know he's certainly capable of doing, again, I want to be clear. There's really no question about his skill. Are his skills diminished? No, certainly not. If he goes in there and does that, he will have, again, I know there's no Topuria matchup on the horizon, but he will have achieved something that no one has done in all of UFC history, and that is no small feat. And let me make that as clear as I possibly can.
So we're all rooting for Volk to do the unthinkable and to make history once again. Okay, perfect. We're on the same side. We're all trying to see Volk make history. Perfect. Going to the co-main event, speaking of the red hot 155ers, Michael Chandler, who we haven't seen in a hot minute, who's been trying to fight Conor McGregor, the ghost of Conor McGregor, may I add, has now stepped in, or will step into the octagon with Paddy the Baddy Pimblett. Luke, I don't know how to think about this one, right? I think Michael has been such a great addition to the UFC, even though he's 2-4 and he's beaten guys that are way past their prime. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say. Yes.
He's extremely exciting, even though he doesn't win. And then we look at the other side of the octagon, and we got Paddy, is he exciting, or is he just like kind of a persona off out of the octagon on camera? Because to me, when I watch Paddy fight, I'm not like, oh wow, he's got it.
Yes, I would largely agree with that. I think Michael Chandler is very skilled, but he's been open about this. He has kind of thrown some of he has admitted that he could probably have a better winning record by fighting, and potentially relative to the way he does fight, in a more conservative way. But he doesn't really want to do that. He kind of wants to fight in a way that is authentic to his interests. And that has somewhat, made his record uneven in the UFC, but he's kind of okay with that. And I got to be honest, I think UFC, and probably on balance, the fans are as well. It's a trade-off that he's, cognizant of making and is happy to do that. Paddy is different to me. Paddy was a guy who, when he came to the UFC, had a significant amount of experience in a very good regional promotion in Europe called Cage Warriors, probably their best promotion in all of Europe. That's debatable, but it's up there. And the point I want to make is he came to the UFC, to me, like, not very good. And I think I still have some questions about it, which is why the matchmaking in this fight is so interesting. However, he has definitely gotten a lot better. B, he was already pretty good at the back, and now he's gotten much better at the back, and I think good at submissions more generally. And then I would say C, he's really filled out at 55. He has gotten significantly bigger, whereas you see him when he gets to the UFC, he's scrawnier. This is brilliant matchmaking. A guy in Paddy, very, very young, but untested at someone against this, at this level, versus Chandler, who sat out all that time waiting for Conor McGregor. He'll be 39 this month.
That's
39
crazy.
is old. for 155, but is much more battle tested, much more proven against much better opposition, wrestler versus grappler, kind of two guys wild on the feet. I'm telling you, this is an excellent, excellent matchup.
Wow, so this is an A+ for you on matchmaking.
It's not like the fight that I'm like dying to see the most, but if you just think about how these two pair up, the guys who do the matchmaking for the UFC, Mick Maynard and Sean Shelby, they did a great job with this one. I think Sean Shelby in particular would be this weight class. It's just very, very smart pairing, and that really tends to bring out the best, most interesting kinds of action.
What's the path for Michael Chandler to get something in the win column?
He has to keep. I mean, you have to ask, like, what does Paddy want to do? Paddy is almost certainly going to want to find the back, you know, and again, that's not the place that necessarily is for Michael Chandler. Oh, he's never been there. Eddie Alvarez had his back. Charles Oliveira had his back. Dustin Poirier had his back. He's kind of used to it to a degree, but certainly that's going to be a high risk area given what Paddy's strengths are. But I think more importantly, he's got to pressure Paddy. He's got to get him backing up, and he's got to get him close to the fence. I mean, what you often realize in MMA is that real estate is the dominant factor in who wins and who loses. Not merely the distance between opponents, but the opponent's back to the cage. And they're very, very good defensive fighters. That is not true. Guys like Ilia Topuria, I mean, yeah, you can get him close to the fence, but he's going to make it very, very difficult for you, and he's going to escape. Israel Adesanya, a similar kind of thing. But guys who are reckless, who if you can back them up, they tend to make very poor, or at least somewhat very, suboptimal decisions with their offense or defense. And it seems like Paddy is that kind of a guy. And of course, just think about Michael Chandler's UFC debut against Dan Hooker. What did he do? Pressure him, had him fading into his hook, and then hit him with the punch, and then stopped him there. Ultimately, he's got a monster punch, and it actually kind of works for that overhand right left hook combination that he throws. To me, that's where this fight is going to be won and lost, because if Paddy's on your back, that's going to be difficult to win. And also, Paddy's going to be taller and longer, so kickboxing range is also not going to be suboptimal. Is going to be suboptimal. Excuse me. You're going to want to be in his face, getting his footwork where he's tripping, not literally, but what we call backstepping or rear stepping, essentially cross stepping in particular. You get him cross stepping up against that fence, and I think it's a completely different scenario that he's up against.
It's just making it a phone booth fight essentially for Michael Chandler. Just getting in his space, closing the distance, and just trying to get stuff that's gonna pop.
Not quite phone booth. I mean, I think that could work for him, but mid-range. So there's long-range, mid-range, and then that phone booth, that close range. Remember, if there's a height differential, you could get clinched up and then kneed, and especially if you dive for a takedown. When there's a height differential, it's not a substantial one, but it's enough. Those kinds of weapons tend to come into play. Speaking of Dan Hooker, that's one of his very favorite ways to do it. He did it against Gilbert Burns, not so much in the clinch, but that kind of differential. So what I would actually say is somewhere right in that pure boxing range. That's where you're going to want to be. And you can't just stay there. You're going to have to find moments to be there. But I think if Chandler's there, that's going to be good for him.
What do you think?
Dude, this is what I mean, dude. These fights are sick. They're really hard
close,
to predict.
Man. Everything
They're
is very
hard.
close.
And I want to be clear. My talent is not predictions. To the extent that I have any prognostication, it's usually the fault lines around which the battle will be fought. So, like, whoever ends up winning that battle tends to do it. But, like, my sense of, like, predicting it. Honestly, again, here's a guy in Michael Chandler who is so much more proven than Paddy, so much more, battle tested and understands everything. And I think Paddy's defense, particularly into striking, has been real suspect. That chin tends to stay up high, and Michael Chandler might just send it into orbit. But at the same time, I kind of feel like the UFC is not cashing out Michael Chandler, but they really want to see what they've got with Paddy. He is surging at all the right moments. I kind of feel like this might be his fight to lose. And I can't believe I'm saying that, because when he came to the UFC, I was like, they were saying early that, like, when Paddy's here, he might fight Ilia Topuria. And I was like, do that and he gets killed. Like, you don't want to do that. But Paddy has really improved and matured, and it's a different ballgame now. Right
now, he's sitting at DK Sportsbooks at -148, Michael Chandler plus 124. Ooh. So it's a very close. And both, by the way, main and co-main are basically almost pick'ems. Volk is a -122 favorite. Diego Lopez plus 102. So it's like the books have them like razor thin across the board.
That's what I mean. Like, when you see matches like this, I mean, I do love boxing. In fact, I love boxing basically as much as I love MMA. But the reality often is, how many times can I say the past year I've seen a main and a co-main with that was hotly anticipated, so fight fans wanted to see it. It was relevant for the major world titles, and you had, to your point, basically betting pick'ems in the main and co-main. It simply does not happen very often. UFC tends to produce it a little bit more regularly. Also, MMA is a little bit more chaotic. But I'm just trying to point out for folks who are like, hey, is this the one that I want to buy, or is that the card that I want to buy? A lot of cards you could skip. This ain't one of them.
This ain't one of them. And speaking of that third fight, Yair Rodriguez versus Patricio Pitbull. First time in the UFC. Like you said, the most decorated Bellator champion of all time. I was looking through his wins and stuff, and I was like, oh my God, these are all title fights? Dude had like 15 title fights in a row. It's insane.
The guy is an Iron Man. He fought in Bellator when all they were doing back in the day was tournaments. And at first he had a little bit of trouble against the Joe Warrens and some Daniel Strausses, but he ended up defeating basically or becoming much better than all of them. And then from there went on an absolutely legendary run. By the way, his power carries because he stopped Michael Chandler in the first freaking round when he jumped up to 155. That dude can absolutely thump. But here's the question. Certainly UFC debuts, it's a bit of a bright light. He's highly experienced, but it's a new thing for him. Also 37. This is not his prime. He is certainly outside of that. And Yair Rodriguez is obviously a guy who can fight at many different ranges, has all kinds of crazy spinning different weapons. That one's we just talked in the co-main about real estate. Here's another fight where that's going to be crucial. I think a guy like Yair Rodriguez is going to want to keep it as far away as possible, and a guy like Patricio Pitbull is going to want to get inside that boxing range where he can bring some of the dynamite power to bear.
It's going to be a sick card, like you said. And then we've got on top of that, not only something that's going to be a good fight, but it's going to be something that has already had the buildup of what we want to see in a good fight, which is Thug Nasty, Bryce Mitchell versus Gene Silva. We've already had them talking back and forth. Now we're going to see it play out in the octagon. Thug Nasty's been through some interesting things. We'll just add, and we'll just keep that to the side. And the fighting nerds are on fire right now. Pratas was supposed to be on this card too. But Jeff Neal and him, they got canceled. What do you think about this on Bryce Mitchell and Gene Silva?
Another absolutely fantastic fight. I mean, to your point about the comments that Bryce Mitchell's got in trouble for, we can just put that to the side and just ask, what kind of a fighter is he? He's very, very good. I mean, for all the other problems he might have, pure skill, he's very good. And in particular, he's good in the grappling. Obviously, on the feet, there are some problems. Josh Emmett sent him to the land of wind and ghost with one of the most nuclear bomb right hands I've ever freaking seen. Well, I mean, he did he not? I mean, it was a terrible knockout.
He did.
But the point I'm trying to make is on the ground, Bryce Mitchell is very skilled. And Jayon Silva, who's awesome on the feet. You mentioned the fighting nerds. These are some of the most creative strikers in the entirety of the UFC, and all of their UFC runs, all of them, for all their fights in the UFCs, they're all undefeated. It's unbelievable how good they are. At the same time, Silva kind of untested on the ground against somebody this good. Bryce Mitchell, very battle-tested relative to him. So this is another kind of interesting battle. This one, though, is not so much about real estate between them. It's about whether Silva can keep it on the feet. If he can, he wins, no problem. If he can't, we'll see how good his ground game actually is.
He's Luke Thomas. Check him out. Luke, plug all your socials and also check him out post-fight. He's going live on his YouTube and going to talk all things UFC 314. Where can they find that?
Yeah, just follow me on YouTube, youtube.com/Luke Thomas. That's my name. And, you know what? Subscribe to my Substack.
Yes.
Luke Thomas on Substack. There you go. How about that?
Saw you were flying up the sports rankings there.
I'm trying, my friend.
Check him out. All of his stuff is dynamite, as you know. Luke, appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Anytime.